Dear viewers, welcome to the new look of Time to Talk, courtesy the Royal Orchid Hotels. I have a guest with me today who has a lot of experience in theatre, radio, communication and developmental journalism. Right? Ashish Sen, a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deepak. You've been very kind.
You started off as a journalist.
That's right.
With
with the Ananda Bazar group of publications.
Business Standard.
Business Standard.
Okay, but then how did you get into this field of information for communication or communication for information? Or it's a little complicated because you know these are about 3-4 words that you get to hear in your resume: information, communication, development, and radio also.
Well, information, communication, development, radio, theatre, print, yes.
Yeah.
But to cut a long story short, or to make a short story long, in the early 80s, when I started off as a trainee journalist in Kolkata with the Business Standard, which was then under the editorship of the late Dr. D.K. Rangnekar, who was in many ways my guru in journalism, and gave me many breaks, I got more and more interested in the role of development journalism, in the role of...
But that was something very nascent then, right? Though people are talking about the power of journalism.
Sure. In some ways it was nascent, Deepak, but in some ways it was much more than what we see then, because you must...
Starting off from the independence era.
Yeah, because the romance with development was still there. This was before liberalization. So there was much more editorial space devoted to discussion, not, I'm afraid, the way we see the print media today. I mean, there are lots of good points about the print media today, but certainly the amount of space that was given to
development. You didn't have advertorials.
You didn't have advertorials, right.
Okay, but you studied in the UK and then came to Kolkata.
That's right. I did my post-graduation in Cambridge University, UK.
Okay, King's College.
That's right. I'm getting a bit worried. You seem to know more about me than I probably do know about myself. But yes, I grew up in Bombay and then went to the UK for a while and then came back and worked in Calcutta, Bombay, and then Bangalore.
Okay, but you've been here for a long time.
I've been here for a long time.
But you're more known for your work in theatre. Then you were heard in association with Action Aid.
Yes. Before Action Aid, I worked for a community media centre for a short while. Not Madhyam, Media Centre.
Media Centre.
Media Centre in Bangalore.
Okay, that was the only place where there was a voice recording studio, I think, a very good one.
Absolutely. We go back a long time. That was in the early 90s, late 80s. And yes, it was the first community media centre of its kind.
You were also doing voiceover as well as you were training people to do voiceovers.
That's right. That's right. And a little more than that, in print journalism also and
but a very
media
serious
studies.
Person then.
Well,
come a long way.
You mean I'm not so serious right now?
No, but you were serious about your work always, weren't you?
I'd like to believe so. I'd like to think so. And
but quite committed to whatever you're doing.
I think so.
But you expected things to really grow into something bigger, right?
Certainly. Certainly. But I also recognize right now that change doesn't happen overnight. Change comes slowly. So whatever... whenever I've been at the crossroads, whenever I've sort of shifted from, say, journalism to media studies to development media, there have been reasons. But somewhere along the journey, I've also learned that it takes time for social change to happen. It doesn't come overnight.
Okay, but the kind of change that you expected in your own life in terms of making you a star or something, because you were in things like media, radio, voice, information, communication, print, and everything. But naturally, people would have expected you to, progress into somebody who would have done shows on a, radio channel or expect to see your pictures in the newspapers. Because I remember then you were known all over, and I think that you went into some kind of a hibernation after that. Or you became more serious and started dedicating and kept...
well, everyone goes through journeys, and perhaps that was another level in the journey, Deepak. But I quite honestly, I think did not really, I'm not one of those people who really known from the age of dot what they want to be and where they will be come 40 years or so on. It's been a journey, it's been an exciting journey, and I think the most important thing is to have a degree of passion in your work, and indeed in whatever you do.
But you're very methodical about everything, even from directing a play to your job.
Wouldn't you agree that there must be method in madness?
But most often, if you are to do anything in radio or in television, you also expect yourself to be a little arty, right? In the sense, arty means a little non-professional, not unprofessional.
So where does that lead your question to?
Is that why that your plays were a little not too, no, I don't mean not so exciting or whatever, but very academic?
I don't know about academic. I think yeah, I've been accused of being sometimes too relevant.
Very proper.
Too relevant, working towards social change, but I think that's the central point.
But in most of your plays, you had people speaking, in impeccable English.
I think
the accent was.
You must come and see the forthcoming production.
I'm talking about
which is actually a revival. Keats Was a Tuber is what we're reviving right now. This will be put up in March this year. But the first time we put it up, when the show was premiered, it was 1996. That's more than 11 years ago. And in fact, one of my passions in theatre has been Indian writing or Indian drama in English. So it's not really been English theatre per se. Whether it has been Cyrus Mistri's Dungaji House or working with Mahesh Dattani over a range of plays.
But you
from
also
Tara,
a play like Map of the World.
I acted in a Map of the World.
But you acted, you used to act quite...
I did, but I do a lot more direction.
Okay.
And I have done more, particularly since the 90s. But to continue in the same way, you know, whether it's Mahesh Dattani's Final Solutions, or Poili's Keats Was a Tuber, or Khalid Ahmed's Come and See My City from Here, or indeed the recent production which I did with Pati Iyer of God and Country, written by Deepak Joshi, and subsequently a play which was a Lankesh play which was translated by Prakash, A Groom for My Sister. They've all been set very much in an Indian or certainly a South Asian milieu.
But is that why theatre stopped doing well with the audience or with the theatre goers? Because somewhere there was a kind of disconnect between the plays and the theatre goers. Because you know, there were these attempts made to connect, to make theatres that were more to make plays that were, or rather direct plays that were, or produce plays that were more Indian. But then you had Indian plays with very, very English-speaking people.
I would like to, and I hope we can agree to disagree on this, because I don't think there has been a disconnect, actually. I think if you look at the connections have grown in different ways. We have many more auditoria today in Bangalore than we did earlier, certainly in the 90s. We have many more theatre groups or groups doing theatre today in the English language, leave alone Kannada, than we did earlier, a decade ago. Having said that, the argument in terms of quality, which is subjective,
but
is always there.
But there were more people who are dedicated to theatre then, right? Then I think it's more professional theatre now.
I think dedication is a very multi-layered word.
Though people were not actually involved in theatre full time, but people give their time, seriously.
Right. I think people are still giving their time because you have many more groups. You have younger people doing a lot more theatre today. And if you're talking about theatre as a profession, it's still far and few. There is a larger issue, however. I mean, if you look at theatre, and certainly theatre in the English language in Bangalore, as opposed to, say, theatre in Bombay, yes, why is it that Bombay can pull off 60 shows, and Bangalore, you know, you're lucky if you do 3 or 4 shows? I think that is something that's been a subject of debate, not just today, but also yesterday and day before yesterday. And one of the issues I think we've not really addressed with sufficient granularity is marketing in the context of theatre.
It's more expensive to produce plays in Bangalore.
Not necessarily, no. Not
because
at all.
I know of people having put up very elaborate and expensive sets also, and you had corporate sponsorships from time to time. But I think that, you know, there was nothing like a theatre group where people contributed. It's like, you know, for some time people looked at each other with suspicion. Like, you know, I mean, it's his play, it's not mine. I'm just acting there. You know, I have nothing to do with it. Maybe the accounts are different, kind of a thing. I think that you had to build a theatre culture, though everybody's purpose was that.
I think
it was not achieved the way it was.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, and I can only speak for myself. My feeling would be that there is a degree of territory in theatre.
Okay.
But I think certainly in many of the productions I've been involved with, there's been a commendable amount of ownership from the community, at least from the community that is actively involved in that production.
Okay.
I think the issue really is over here that how do you sustain a group when all of you are not involved full-time?
Okay.
Which is why, not just in Bangalore, but in many other places, how many theatre groups, like the theatre group of Mumbai, do you have in the one? Today you've got Q theatre productions, but which was actually, it was the legacy of theatre group which was carried forward. Here again, you've got ART, Jagrati, Bangalore Little Theatre, but you know, without something being a full-time occupation or a full-time profession, sustainability is a difficult
But don't
issue.
you think, though you have more groups now, that once upon a time, with those few groups in Bangalore, that it was like a certificate to belong to one of these groups?
Perhaps, but I think, you know, that itself is underscores the point that when a medium grows and flowers, then
it goes through a change.
It goes through a change. So
okay. But then, you've been using this word community quite often, and you've also been working with community development and community radio, community broadcasting, and all that, and you're also the president of the Community Broadcasters Association.
At the moment, yes, I am. I've been elected the president for the Asia Pacific chapter of the World Association of Community Radio Broadcasters.
Okay.
The area which is central to my interest is media democratization for social change.
Okay.
So yes, in that
But that's
context,
the purpose of the government too, right? Because that's what the government wants to do.
well, there is a difference between public media and community media. And while the government is a key player in development, it cannot be the only player.
But is there,
and you cannot expect the government to do
media
everything.
that you're talking about?
Is it? I'm sorry?
A regulated media like the public media,
Well,
particularly with radio.
Yeah, any media has to be subject to regulation, but you can also have self-regulation. You have codes of conduct, and that's the point that we are making. Yes, I'm actively involved in community radio and the community radio movement, and we feel very good that India, after more than about 12 years since the Supreme Court of India passed the judgment that airwaves are public property, finally got legislation enabling communities to apply for licenses.
How does it actually work?
Today, in principle, universities, NGOs with at least 3 years existence, and registration that is, and Krishi Darshans, all having community credentials are eligible to apply for license.
How do you define a community there?
That's a good question. I mean, you cannot have today, according to the legislation, a community on its own applying for registration. Now, that's a debatable point. We can take that forward. But under the Indian legal umbrella, you have to be an NGO or a CBO. Now, how do you define a community with, as you say? A community can either be defined as a group of people living within a defined geographical space, and therefore, because they live within that space, have common interests, common issues. And community radio really refers to FM radio, so line of sight radio. So
basically, development is the agenda, is it?
Well,
or even dissemination of information.
It's really, a community radio is nothing other than of, for, and by the community. So if it was community print, it would be nothing. It would be for local development and local information for local, for communities to be in touch with each other. For communities to address the issue of getting access of their own information for their own needs.
They should sometimes remind themselves.
Sure, Let me give you an example. For instance, we work in Voices very closely in partnership with Mairada with a community group based in Buddhikote, which is in Kolar. And that's about 100 kilometers from Bangalore. Now, Kolar is one of the poorer districts in Karnataka. Literacy remains an issue which is challenging. So not surprisingly, when a survey was carried out about 7 years ago, it was determined that radio, it made sense to have radio. The nearest, because radio relies on the spoken word, the nearest radio station was AIR. Now, AIR does very commendable work. But AIR Bangalore broadcasts in even a Kannada that is not spoken by the community there, because Budhikote is a border village. The people speak a mix of Kannada, Telugu and Tamil.
That's so
And
much in touch with reality what you're speaking, right? Because that's one of the larger problems in this country.
So
Because we
hence-
assume that what we do is something that's accepted by everyone.
Absolutely right, absolutely. So it's not me there, it is the local community,
Yeah.
and it's promoting
Out of need.
out of need, local information for local need.
Okay.
And this, there is a connect to this, to the larger public agenda, because
Okay.
at the moment, we're all talking about civil society participation in governance.
Okay.
But if you're building that connection, you've got to promote community communication, be it radio, be it print journalism, be it any other kind of theater, any other kind of media. It must have that component. Otherwise, without it being related to that need,
Okay.
how can you expect the community
Okay.
to participate?
Why radio in your life? Is it because you've seen the power of
Let me say it's
radio,
not just been radio in my
or-
life. And
No,
it-
no, because it looks like you've really been working much with the radio.
Certainly for the last decade, yes.
Okay.
And before that, yes, I've
But
anchored
I'm
radio
sure
programs.
you didn't foresee the growth of the FM radio, right?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I took this up.
Okay.
Because
when you started, I don't
Yeah.
think it was so.
no, it was not. It was not.
big
But there was a
thing.
but there was a clear advocacy agenda.
Okay.
And
so
while
expected something to happen.
well, no, we had to make it happen.
Okay.
Because if you had, in point of fact, a Supreme Court judgment which said airwaves were there
Okay.
for public use, for community use,
Okay.
then this was an area which needed
Not
to
just
be
for propaganda. or for dance.
exactly. So
Yeah.
this was an area which needed to be constructively exploited for social
Okay.
change, for development, and who better to do it than the community? In a
Okay.
country like India, and this is not just being academic, it's a fact, we've made lots of strides, but we have also lots of challenges. You look at the Human Development Report released by the UNDP every year, we still hover around some 126 or 127 out of 170 odd countries.
I know.
And why? Because of our certainly less than satisfactory performances in areas like health, in areas like
Because
education.
I think that people,
So we
people become
rem-
very insulated.
No, so the point over here, Deepak, is we remain to address the literacy challenge.
Okay.
Now, this is where radio can play a huge role, because radio relies on the spoken word.
Okay.
So-
So, literacy is not just about
So
writing.
exactly, it's not just
Yeah,
about
yeah.
writing. It is, but here,
Okay.
if you can speak the language, also we're a country of so many different languages, so many different dialects. Radio, in terms of access, reaches out to
And what you're
90%.
talking is so important. If somebody coming from a border district, being able to converse with a person in the city,
Right.
and that itself is an achievement. People understanding
I
each
do
other.
think so.
To be able to hear each other out.
I do think so, absolutely.
Okay.
But just for a moment, when I say that, certainly we can come back to this to the issue of community radio. I'd like to actually go back to my original idea, and that it's not just radio, it's media for change. And I'd like
Okay.
to take 2 minutes to share with you. And
That's happening through Madhyam.
no, through voices.
Okay.
Voices and Madhyam Communications.
Okay.
Okay. Madhyam is a totally separate NGO
Okay.
and has always been.
Okay.
What I would like to say is that, one of the areas that we're working with is a community of people with disabilities.
Okay.
And
You
for the-
have a disability information service also.
We did in collaboration with the government over here.
Okay.
But we've recently started an e-newsletter, which is a little over a year and a half old,
Okay.
called Definition. And the objective of this paper is to actually get the participation and ownership of children and adults of the hearing impaired or deaf community
Okay.
to pen their own thoughts and to write their own language.
Okay.
Now, this is another example
Okay.
of a kind of community media which provides access and information
Basically
to a
providing
community.
platforms, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's not just about everybody can be very condescending or patronizing, but somebody needs to actually provide
Absolutely.
a platform for people to feel okay.
Absolutely.
More than feeling proud or
No, to have a
having
sense of-
achieved or whatever. Sense of belonging.
A sense of belonging, a sense of ownership.
Okay.
And how long can we actually keep saying, all right, the mainstream media must give more space?
Yeah.
The mainstream media has its own
That's very
compulsions.
patronizing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got to walk our talk, as they
Yeah.
say. And this is an area which
Okay.
can go forward. It doesn't mean that I don't interact with the mainstream media. I do. I continue to write.
Okay, but you have something called proof energy communication service.
Proof Energy Center. This is something that we are not actively involved in today, but we were actually quite involved with it until a few years ago. And the reason is we're still associated
And
with
Proof is the acronym
for Public Records of Operations and Finance. It was an idea which was mooted by Ramesh Ramanathan of Janagraha, and 4 NGOs came together in the first year to try and work to enhance transparency.
Responsible governance.
Well, to enhance transparency by way of financial transparency with the city government, with the BMP. And the BMP, to its credit, agreed to provide this information.
For a while.
And yes, but then the next step was that we had to socialize the message, because that was our responsibility. So it was not just community participation, but community communication. And voices came in at that point of time. It facilitated the creation of a community group largely driven by senior citizens called the Proof Energy Center. Many of them are committed to the idea of the right to information. They've joined several other related groups in this regard. And they used media, radio, print, to disseminate the idea and the public discussions to the larger community through this.
When people cast aspersions on NGOs these days, being somebody who has been associated with a lot of NGOs, what do you actually feel about the role of NGOs or their responsibility, or in building an atmosphere of trust?
I think it's very important. I think that's a very important question that you've raised.
Because you work with ActionAid.
Yes, right.
ActionAid is not just any other NGO.
Right.
But still, because everybody seems to be working in the shadow of larger NGOs, at least even sometimes projecting themselves to be doing something very good.
Right. I think that
it seems to be a little dangerous now, because I mean, the element of trust seems to be missing there.
Well, I think the 2 issues that you raised over there, and one is the issue of transparency and accountability, and the other is the issue of sustainability and identity. And you have many different kind of NGOs, like you have many different players in the corporate sector. You've got the MNCs and you've got the Indian organizations. So yes, you have INGOs, the international NGOs, and you've got the local field-based NGOs who do direct engagement, to answer your second question first. But the first question, yes, I think NGOs do need to actually provide emphasis on accountability and transparency. I think there have been issues in this sector.
For people to take them seriously, because the important role these NGOs can actually play. Not that we may have actually benefited from the roles that they've played already. Yes, to an extent. But for all of them to be playing a constructive role, I think there should be more, not just in terms of a physical or rather a structural association with the community, but also some kind of an emotional association where there's also trust and dependability, and a long-term sustainability.
Of course, those are the very issues. We're totally in sync over here, and that's something that we're driven by. But like in any sector, you have aberrations, and I think we've got to reckon with them. But having said that, I completely agree with you, because it's not just about financial sustainability, it's not just about financial accountability. There is an emotional integrity between the NGO and the community, which is very important.
Your wife Munira Sen has been going through, I'm sure, in at least establishing a lot of things.
Well, I
going forward to reach a message across to people, to do things, because it's not easy to get people to just work with you.
Yeah, well, without paying Munira a compliment, I think it must be said, to her credit, that
but you
Madhyam
have
has
been
been sustainable.
Right?
No, Madhyam has been driven. I mean, we have entirely by her. And it is to her credit that she had facilitated.
What role do you play there?
I am the director of Madhyam Communications, which was a separate independent NGO, and Voices. They're totally separate.
But you don't help her in her work. You do, I'm sure.
Well, we have.
She takes help from you.
No. in as much as she helps me, I help her. But I think we're very serious to keep our spaces very
That's very important.
Distinct. Yes, absolutely. We come together on spaces which might be areas of common passion, like theatre, but that's nothing to do with work.
Is there anything else that you do together, like apart from theatre, and also maybe cooperating with each other when you find
Certainly, I mean,
spaces.
I think when we find common spaces,
Yeah.
we certainly
Or other
strategically...
cooperating spaces.
I think it's important to have
Or
common
instead of
spaces.
actually working parallelly.
No, I think when there are points of convergence, when
Yeah.
people ask us to do something together, we're more than happy to do that, because
Okay.
that brings, builds synergy. But it's not just between Munira and myself. It could be between Munira and myself and another NGO or another organization. I think the whole idea, and that's the rationale, the raison d'etre for that, is networking is critical. And it's
Okay.
not just networking on paper, it's active engagement. So for instance, yes, there have been consultations that many of us have come together.
But it's very important for an organization like yours to maintain its individuality.
To maintain its identity, certainly. But I think...
Or to identity is one thing, but to become very independent and then work with others instead of I mean, having an arm here, a leg there, and still being independent.
Of course. I mean, I think you have to have a very clear focus in whatever
Yeah.
you do, and that's...
Because sometimes you're known by because sometimes you're known by your association.
Sure, you should be, I mean, there is an issue over here which is important, and that is the individual
Okay.
can be known for many things. The institution can also be known for many things. So while there is an area of convergence, there may be differences. This is not the case in Voices, because Voices also does community theatre. But I happened to be doing theatre long before I joined Voices, and that's a separate identity. We started talking of that also.
Okay.
So I think it's important to maintain that. But yes, I think a common identity becomes important when you have a larger agenda. That cannot happen unless your institution has a focus. Like our focus is community media.
Okay.
We are known as key players in in helping to set up the community radio forum in this country, the CRF.
Okay.
That kind of networking is very important for community radio, because it enables community radio to go to the next step, to go to scale, where we are one of many other players in the country.
Okay. You write for a lot of newspapers these days.
Not for a lot of newspapers, Deepak, that's very kind, but for
it
some,
looks like,
certainly.
the Indian Express and that, there's so many newspapers.
I have written
But I
for the
think
Indian-
whenever you feel like writing about something, you do write.
Yes, I write regularly right
But you
now
do
for the
write
Bangalore
a lot,
Mirror.
otherwise,
Yes.
whether you write for the newspapers or not.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that's been a passion from a long time ago, and as you know, I
Because
started
during
my
your time
career
in Asian sorry.
in Business Standard.
No, Asian Aid. No. But during your time in Action Aid,
Yep.
you also encouraged a lot of people to write, because you had
Yes.
some serious journalists working for you there.
That's true. That's very, very true. You have a great memory, which is why this show is such a great show. But that's absolutely true. I used to be the editor of a development journal there, which was
Okay.
brought out by Action Aid, called Changes. And yes, we had a lot of journalists helping us to take that
Okay.
forward. We also built interfaces then with other media, with TV. Actually, at that stage with TVI and BITV, where we showcased positive stories of development from across the
But
country.
what kind of support have you been getting from mainstream media in Karnataka,
Personally or institutionally?
institutionally?
Institutionally, our support has been strategic, but it's.
Because
I would
sometimes
love to have more support.
The language media always seems to be a little, suspicious of the NGO activities.
You know, I mean, I would only like to speak personally.
yeah.
We've actually had a very positive interaction with the language media in Karnataka.
Okay.
So, and I would
Is that
like
what
to
you
stay
expect
with
it to
that.
be? Because
I think you can't expect anything in the media. You have to expect the
Okay,
unpredictable,
okay.
which is why it makes it so exciting.
Okay.
But if you want a general comment, yes, I feel the media can do much more in the area of development
Maybe we
than
should
they are
begin with
doing.
you by doing good work. You've already been doing something.
But I'm saying, so therefore, personally,
But
I don't...
somewhere you may have to
personally,
do
I-
the good work of telling the media that, look, I'm doing some good work.
But personally, I don't have a hassle, because whenever I've gone to the media, by and large, I have found that there has been no personal problem with the media. We've got coverage, but I think you have to go one step further. Yes, I do believe that NGOs have to do more, but it's not just about the press conferences, Deepak. It's not just about event-based coverage. It's like
It's
embedding
not
it.
talking about the villagers in a 5-star hotel.
Could be, absolutely. But it's but there's no problem in engaging the two and bringing the two together, because that is a function of corporate social responsibility, and it should be projected thus in the media for all of us to see.
Okay.
Business is not a bad word. Business is a very good word. Why is it that social business is coming of age in this country right now?
Yeah.
The whole accent of development seems to also, or should certainly, move in the direction of social entrepreneurs. So I think you have to build more partnerships, more interfaces between public, private, and community.
Yeah.
And certainly the media is a player there. You have public media, Doordarshan, AIR, you have private media, where we're sitting and having an extremely stimulating conversation,
Yeah.
and you've got community media.
Yeah.
So if we've got a good interface based on principles
Synergy.
of inclusion,
Yeah.
of equity, then I think we've come a long way, and we must work towards that.
And I can only wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Deepak.
Thank you very much. For
And I would love
Sure.
for you to come and join us and be a part of this journey.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you.